Tonight, recall Parliament this weekend. The First Minister criticises the UK government for not holding a vote on whether to go ahead with airstrikes on sites used by the Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen.
I don't know what the end goal is, I don't know what the objective is, I don't know what the full legal basis is. So I can't support an action where I've not been given the full information.
Also making the headlines, claims that former sub-postmasters convicted of embezzlement in the post office scandal could miss out on being exonerated if they unsuccessfully appeal their conviction.
In sport, the Spiders man, Callum Davidson, targets the top flight after becoming Queen's Park boss.
And we meet Yampel the bear, who's settling into his new home in West Lothian after being rescued from Ukraine. I'm Vanessa Kennedy in Edinburgh.
And I'm John Mackay in Glasgow. This is the STV News at 6.
Good evening. The First Minister wants MPs to be recalled this weekend after the US and British militaries bombed more than a dozen sites used by the Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen. Hamza Yousaf criticised the UK government for not holding a vote on whether to go ahead with the strikes.
So, what prompted the airstrikes? The US and UK say it's to protect the Red Sea, a key international trade route, and the fastest between Europe and Asia. Several commercial vessels there have been targeted by Houthi militants who back Hamas and are targeting ships travelling to Israel. Major companies, including the oil giant BP and those carrying goods to the likes of IKEA, have rerouted their vessels around southern Africa. This has added time and cost to journeys, and the sharp rising costs could be passed on to you, the customer. Our political correspondent Ewan Petrie reports.
The military strikes began last night, targeting 16 Houthi positions. The US-led attack included RAF Typhoons from Cyprus. The strikes are said to have hit command centres, munitions depots and air defence systems. The Prime Minister has been visiting another conflict zone. Speaking in Ukraine, he described these strikes as proportionate and in self-defence.
We've carried out a series of strikes together with allies which will, we believe, degrade and disrupt the capability. The types of things that we've targeted are launch sites for missiles and for drones. Initial indications are that those strikes have been successful. We'll continue to monitor the situation, but it's clear that this type of behaviour can't be met without a response. We need to send a strong signal that this breach of international law is wrong. People can't act like this with impunity, and that's why, together with allies, we've decided to take this action.
The Iran-backed group began targeting commercial ships in the Red Sea in retaliation for Israel's action in Gaza. The Houthis have said the airstrikes will not go without punishment or retaliation. Here, Labour have backed the decision to intervene.
We support this action. Obviously, we need the Prime Minister to make a full statement to Parliament, but we're fully supportive of the action that's needed to stop these attacks taking place.
Hamza Yousaf was launching the SNP's campaign for a general election, due to take place later this year. The party's leader supports the UN resolution calling for an end to Houthi attacks in the Red Sea. But the First Minister was not among those briefed on the decision last night. He's refusing to back the airstrikes until he has more details.
I don't know what the end goal is, I don't know what the objective is, I don't know what the full legal basis is. So I can't support an action where I've not been given the full information. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to just simply fall into line because I think that we have to support military intervention at all costs.
So Parliament isn't being recalled today. Should it be recalled over the weekend, or is a statement on Monday enough?
It should be recalled over the weekend. It should be recalled as soon as possible, including over the weekend. Now, if we have to wait till Monday, then so be it.
These airstrikes send a clear message the West is willing to act to protect shipping routes in the Red Sea. But with anger growing in Yemen, there are also fears they could increase tension further and lead to an escalation in violence in the Middle East. Ewan Petrie, STV News.
Our Westminster correspondent Paris Goutsianis joins us with more on the political reaction. And Paris, why hasn't Parliament been recalled today?
Well, John, there's no constitutional requirement for the Prime Minister to ask Parliament before holding military action, but the politics are still sensitive. Like any intervention in the Middle East, the memory of the Iraq War hangs over this decision, even if the scale of the operation is totally different. Rishi Sunak will also be thinking of David Cameron's decision to hold a vote in 2013 before airstrikes on the Syrian regime, which MPs rejected. That unravelled plans to intervene in the Syrian civil war in a humiliating fashion. Now, last night, the Commons Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, was summoned to Downing Street for a briefing just as those Typhoon jets were taking off. And we know that he offered to recall Parliament. That offer was declined.
So when will MPs get a say in the military action?
Well, there will be a statement in the Commons on Monday, but the government has no plans to hold a vote. For now, Labour leader Keir Starmer is offering his support, and the SNP is limiting its criticism. The US and the UK insist that these strikes are proportionate, that the Houthi military forces have been degraded and they'll be put off future attacks. But what if the drone and missile strikes on ships continue? Could the UK be drawn into an open-ended military action like there was against ISIS? Well, that would increase pressure for a vote and raise fears of a bigger economic impact and perhaps a wider conflict. As ever, events in the Middle East have an extraordinary power of affecting our lives right here.
Indeed. Paris at Westminster, thank you.
Well, elsewhere, as the conflict rages on in Gaza, a Scottish man has told STV News about the horrors he witnessed while he was trapped there. Separated from his wife after war began, he's now home, but says he fears for his family still there.
The First Minister's brother-in-law has been denied passage to a safe country despite pleas from Hamza Yousaf and his wife Nadia El Nakla to bring him to Scotland. Vanessa Taff has more.
Reunited after weeks trapped in war-torn Gaza, Yunus was visiting family in October when the war began. These attacks outside his window, an everyday occurrence.
In 21st century, you can see a woman and a kid being killed in front of you and you can do nothing about it.
Yeah.
Which kind of life is that? Which kind of world? I don't want to be in this world. Nobody wants. Like to see a mother and kid like being holding a white flag, like a giving up.
Yeah, and
they're shooting them and killing them.
Yunus relied on a local hospital to charge his phone and access clean water. When he finally got a text granting him safe passage back to Scotland, he was digging his next-door neighbours out of the rubble of an explosion.
Like all my conversation with my family, it's like, who's still alive?
Despite the worry, Yola and Yunus are glad to be back together again.
It was very, very happy moment. Very, very happy moment. And I'm so glad that he's back home.
Yeah, she received me with the Palestinian song.
Yeah, I was playing Palestinian song when he was coming on the thing.
But not everyone has had the dream family reunion.
How are you?
Nadia El Nakla's brother, who was also the First Minister's brother-in-law, is still stuck in Gaza. He's a doctor there. His wife and their children were given safe passage to Turkey, but Nadia desperately wants to bring him to Scotland.
For me, what's really difficult is I don't have any words of comfort anymore. I keep saying to him, yeah, I'm sure you'll get out soon, I'm sure you'll get out soon, you'll be with your kids soon. But we're not seeing any hope. We're not seeing any results of people being allowed to leave. So it's really difficult to give him any sort of comfort. And really, when I just see his face, I just want to cry.
There are still regular protests and calls for a ceasefire in Gaza happening across the country. Many families here know and have witnessed the true horrors of this war, which currently has no end in sight. Vanessa Taff, STV News.
Former sub-postmasters convicted of embezzlement in Scotland have been put in an intolerable position over whether to continue their appeals in court, according to an advocate representing one of them.
A hearing today heard concerns anyone fighting to clear their name and losing the case could then miss out on being exonerated by any wider moves made by the government. Here's our senior reporter Gordon Cree.
Rab Thompson was a sub-postmaster in Clackmannanshire when he was convicted of embezzlement. He always denied it, but pled guilty at the last minute to avoid a prison sentence. Today, he came to the appeal court as one of 3 seeking to have their convictions quashed. The advocate for Mr. Thompson said it was almost 20 years since he'd been audited by the Post Office and he was focused only on clearing his name. The lawyer for another of the postmasters, Allied Cloisterhouse, said that she faced an intolerable position. Do you continue with the appeal and the risk of losing, or wait for the detail of the government scheme to exonerate people? The judge, Lady Dorian, has expressed some frustration about how long the whole process is taking. But for the Crown, the Solicitor General said one problem was the provision of documents by the Post Office. She said more than 700 had been disclosed in the past week and now need to be looked at. For now, Mr. Thompson is continuing his appeal. It's due to be heard next month. But that issue of the Post Office being slow or reluctant to disclose information was also addressed at the public inquiry today.
There is always, in these situations, below the waterline, an occasional document that might emerge. That is the reality of the situation. But as a structural issue, it's certainly Post Office's aim to move beyond the present situation.
Would you agree that the context in which the disclosure failings for which you convey the Post Office's apology in that paragraph have occurred in a context that includes the following? Firstly, that the inquiry is examining the extent to which the Post Office breached the law in not disclosing relevant documents and information in criminal proceedings against sub-postmasters and counterclerks.
Those are very much within the terms of reference, yes.
As many as 100 Scots may have been accused of stealing. Chris ran post offices in Kinlochrannoch and Pitlochry between 2007 and 2010. He was threatened with prosecution.
I didn't go to jail, thankfully. I was never charged. And again, thankfully, but they still ruined my life. There's not a day goes by without me thinking about it. It's the first thing you think of when you wake up. It's the last thing you're thinking of when you're going to bed. I do hope there will come a time where that's not the case.
For now, everyone caught up in this will be closely watching the courts and Parliament in the hope of more positive news to come. Gordon Cree, STV News, Edinburgh.
Other stories, and a husband has been charged with murdering his wife in East Lothian on New Year's Day. 33-year-old mum of 3, known as Nasso Isaacs, was found dead at a property in North Berwick's Craigleith Avenue. Today, her 37-year-old husband, Mom Patty Dodo Isaacs, appeared at Edinburgh Sheriff Court, charged with her murder. He made no plea and was remanded in custody.
People are being told not to visit hospital if they have the flu or COVID symptoms after new admissions to affected wards were paused. NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde has put in place control measures to try to stop infection spreading. The Health Board says people should only attend A&E if their condition is life-threatening. The personal prison officer of a young woman who took her own life in Pavement Young Offenders Institution has told a fatal accident inquiry that he categorically had no concerns for the prisoner's safety.
Scott Wilson told the Joint Fatal Inquiry he had a good relationship with 21-year-old Katie Allen and wasn't privy to any information which would have suggested she was struggling. From Falkirk Sheriff Court, here's Brandon Cook.
21-year-old Katie Allen and 16-year-old William Brown both took their own lives at Pavement Youth Offenders Institution within 4 months of each other. Throughout the first week of the Joint Fatal Accident Inquiry, the court has heard evidence about Katie Allen's mental and physical health in the weeks and days leading up to her death. Today, the inquiry heard from Katie Allen's personal prison officer, Scott Wilson. He spoke of having a good relationship with the young inmate and that she was extremely well liked by other prisoners. Mr. Wilson said he had no knowledge of the bullying Katie had received and wasn't aware of any concerns for her safety, as she always presented herself in a positive way to him. The prison officer said he noticed Katie's alopecia getting worse and brought in a bandana for her dignity. He said he categorically never heard any negative comments about her condition by other inmates. On the evening before Katie died, Mr Wilson said she had been upset. The officer insists he was told this was following a bad visit by her mum and brother. The inquiry also heard from the prison officer who transferred Katie back to her hall following the visit from her mum and brother that evening. Mary Claire Docherty said she told her fellow officers that Katie's mum said the young inmate was being threatened by the inmates on either side of her daughter's cell and that her daughter was terrified. The inquiry also heard from a former prisoner who was serving alongside Katie. Megan Sandeman spoke of a weekend of shouting, taunting and fighting in the days before the 21-year-old took her own life, and agreed, in hindsight, there were warning signs regarding her mental state. The inquiry will resume again on Monday. Brandon Cook, STV News, Falkirk Sheriff Court.
Child protection experts say lessons must be learned quickly from a review set up following one of the largest ever child abuse prosecutions. This week, 7 people convicted of being part of a paedophile ring in Glasgow were told they face at least a 3-month wait to find out if they will be given life sentences. The delay will not affect an inquiry into why authorities didn't act sooner on early signs of neglect, allowing the crimes to go undetected for years. Here's our chief reporter, Sharon Fruit.
The levels of depravity committed by this group horrified the most experienced of child protection experts. The young victims were subjected to years of unimaginable abuse.
These children have been through an ordeal which will create a legacy of pain for their lifetime. There's no question about that. We owe it to them that we strip back all of the excuses, that we strip back all of the information, and then we work out why the statutory agencies act more quickly, because early intervention is key.
5 men, Ian Owens, John Clark, Paul Brannan, Barry Watson and Scott Forbes, along with 2 women, Elaine Lannery and Leslie Williams, were all convicted of sexual abuse, including rape. 4 of the group attempted to murder a child by trapping them inside a microwave, an oven and a freezer.
You should understand that each of you faces a very substantial prison sentence.
Last week, the judge warned he is considering imposing orders monitoring each of the 7 for the rest of their lives if they are considered for release from prison. Sentencing has been delayed for risk assessments to be carried out. In a flat close to Glasgow city centre, the group admitted to openly taking heroin and crack cocaine in front of their victims. Older children were subjected to sexual violence and beatings. The jury heard concerns of neglect had previously been raised by teachers and support services. A review of all agencies involved is underway. Those who work with abuse survivors say it must lead to change.
There have been so many reviews set up and inquiries, and to me it's just a long pattern of glacial ineffectiveness. This has happened in plain sight in Glasgow to children, as well as the sentencing being really important to witness and to observe and to see it recorded. It's a wake-up call for us as a society in Scotland that we haven't got it right.
And I don't believe, that neglect couldn't have been identified in that case at a very early point. By the time the police come in, it's almost too late. So the review that takes place must be fundamentally independent, because that's where we're going to learn the lessons that need to be applied to make sure that this type of horrific case never happens again.
The chair of Glasgow's Child Protection Committee described this as a highly complex case and has pledged to carry out a full learning review. The group will return to court in April. Sharon Frew, STV News.
Both East and South Ayrshire councils are to consider plans for a ban on pavement and double parking next week. Legislation has been brought in to make it easier for local authorities to ensure pavements and roads are more accessible. If approved, the councils would hope to implement the new scheme in October. Now, Rahman is here with your Friday Sport.
Thanks a lot, John. Good evening to you all. Hearts have signed Wolves right back Dexter Lambakisa on loan until the end of the season. The 20-year-old, who was on loan at English Championship side Rotherham this season, has been capped 7 times by Jamaica. Head coach Stephen Naismith had made signing a right-back a top priority in the January transfer window. St Mirren have announced the signing of Hyo-koo Kwon from Celtic on loan until the end of the season. The South Korean midfielder joins the Saints from the Scottish champions who moved to the Parkhead side in the summer on a 5-year deal. Motherwell chairman Jim McMahon insists the club aren't begging for money. That's after an appeal for fresh investment via a social media video. The club released a video earlier this week appealing directly to Hollywood celebrities to part with their cash. Some fans have described the video, which has been viewed more than 2 million times on social media, as embarrassing, but McMahon disagrees.
We are not desperate for money. We are financially stable, and as I said, we have enough money to see us through this season, next, maybe a bit in the next. So I don't see it as begging for money, and I am not embarrassed by it.
Callum Davidson says he hopes to turn Queen's Park into an established Premiership team, but admits his first task as the club's new head coach is to keep them in the Championship. The former St Johnstone boss takes over with the Spiders' second bottom of the table. But as Ronnie Charters now reports, Davidson's relishing the challenge.
He's the new man in the dugout at Queen's Park, but Callum Davidson is not sitting around. He may be taking charge of a team in a relegation battle in the second tier, but he has his eyes set on the Premiership.
What I like about Queen's Park is they're building it sort of foundations first, then moving up the way. It's not the other way around, so you might be a quick hit up there, but we're wanting to be there and sustain ourselves there. So that's the key. It's difficult because it's very hard to do, but hopefully we've started, and hopefully, it might take a wee bit of time, but hopefully we can get there sooner rather than later.
The club moved off the bottom of the table with a 2-1 win over Dunfermline last week, and Davison admits priority number one is to preserve their Championship status.
Short term, obviously, is basically staying in the league to start with. Where we are, if I look at it, if I look at a lot of the games they've played, there's a lot of good stuff there, and it's just trying to sort of tweak it and make sure we're still trying to play a certain type of football, but also win games at the same time.
Davidson returns to management 9 months since his sacking at St Johnstone. So what would he have changed about his time in charge in Perth?
Probably not a lot. I think the success we had there was fantastic. So I'm hopefully trying to bring some of that sort of positivity, that kind of ethos to Queen's Park, and hopefully I can obviously achieve success, whatever level it is, try and achieve success on the pitch and off the pitch here.
His first game in charge is away to league leaders Raith Rovers tomorrow. Ronnie Charters, STV News.
Rugby, and Mark Dodson says his decision to stand down as Scottish Rugby Chief Executive has not been influenced by the governing body's handling of Siobhan Cadigan's death. Dodson, who has been in the role since 2011, is contracted until the summer of 2025 but will leave his post this summer. Former Scotland international Cadigan died in 2021, with her family believing rugby-related head injuries had caused a rapid decline in her health. Last year, Scottish Rugby apologised to Cadigan's family for its handling of the 26-year-old's death and says it let down her family.
Were you under any pressure to stand down?
None at all. Entirely my decision. I talked through with John McGuigan at length during the autumn, and I suggested this is the right time to go. We agreed, and we moved on. This is entirely my call.
Staying with rugby, and Edinburgh and Glasgow Warriors are back in European action tomorrow. Sean Everett's side welcome Gloucester in the Challenge Cup, while the Warriors are away to Exeter Chiefs in the Champions Cup, a match you can see live on STV.
This is a big game tomorrow against two teams that are desperate to do well in the Challenge Cup. It's always big for us at home. We've had good crowds at most of our games this year. And tomorrow, we've got a couple of thousand more than what we had when we played against Cust. So it is important for us to build confidence within our performance with the spectators.
It's very important for us to progress in Europe. We put ourselves under pressure with the loss against Northampton here, obviously. But it's all about learning, it's all about getting better, it's all about improving, and hopefully now this week we can make another step forward in Europe.
That, folks, is all your sport tonight.
Thanks, Rahman. Now here's the weather forecast with Sean. A
breezy morning will be followed up with a flurry of fresh delights for lunch. TUI sponsors STV Weather.
Very good evening to you. We'll get to the cold and wintry weather for next week in just a wee while. Tonight, though, anything that falls from the sky will be of rain. It's actually going to be quite a damp night, especially through the early hours. A little weather front sinking its way down from the north. But look at those overnight temperatures. 6 or 7, 8 degrees Celsius. Very mild through tonight. Next week, we can add a minus to that. Possibly down to about -7, -8 degrees on some nights. So very mild through tonight with the cloud and the outbreaks of rain. So into tomorrow, actually not a bad day. It should be a dry day, bright or sunny spells, good long spells of sunshine. I expect further south we'll start to see a little bit more cloud coming into northern parts. A few scattered showers into the likes of Coll, Tiree, Mull, around Lochaber, northern parts of Stirlingshire later on. Temperatures about 6 or 7 degrees Celsius. It's on Sunday we start to drop those temperatures down, 3 to 5 degrees, especially later on in the day. But a northerly, quite a good direction for us. A lot of dry, sunny weather. Most of those snow showers across northern parts. So we will see some around the Hebrides at times through the week. And in that shaded area, that's where most of the wintry showers will be through next week. So you think, well, there we go, not too bad for us. It's going to be largely dry. However, the one to watch for us is some of our weather models are forecasting a longer spell of sleet and snow for a time on Tuesday. Current tracks taking that across central and eastern parts, so some of us could get snow on Tuesday. One to watch, as I say. Bye-bye.
TUI sponsors STV Weather.
And finally, an Asiatic black bear who was rescued from an abandoned zoo in Ukraine safely arrived in Scotland this morning.
Yampil, named after the city he's from, was discovered days away from death by soldiers in 2022 following the outbreak of the war. He's now settling into his new home at Five Sisters Zoo in West Lothian. Amy Flett reports.
This was the moment soldiers rescued Yampil from an abandoned zoo in Ukraine that had been almost completely destroyed in the months following the breakouts of the war. The bear was found concussed and facing death after a shell had exploded near his cage just days before he was discovered. But after a long journey, today he finally stepped foot on Scottish soil.
Yampil was in transit for almost 24 hours. He was put in a big transport crate just yesterday morning over in Belgium, and he arrived just about 8 o'clock this morning, so he's had quite the journey. We didn't know if he would maybe be showing some signs of something similar to PTSD. It's too early for us to say right now exactly how he will settle in, but he seems to be doing pretty well this morning.
I first learned about Yampil through the Nature Help Centre in Belgium. So I've been kind of regular contact with them, and I'd heard about Yampil and I found out about the story, and I kind of knew straight away that I wanted to help. So I got in touch and reached out to them just to see if there's anything we could do, and then because that was 6 months on, we were kind of well along the road to kind of bringing him here.
Yampil's story quickly began to gather national media attention after the zoo began fundraising efforts to build a £200,000 enclosure for him, which he's set to move into in the spring. For now, he'll remain in this temporary enclosure, but he hasn't had any trouble finding his bearings.
He seems really chilled. Even when we went over to see him in Belgium, he was really chilled out. He was coming up to see us, interacting with us, and he seems to have walked out the crate and gone, yep, I'm all right here. And then hopefully that will continue and he'll fully settle in and he'll be happy.
Yampil joins thousands of Ukrainian nationals that have come to call Scotland their home in the last 2 years, a testament that anything is possible. Amy Flett, STV News, West Calder.
Oh, hopefully he'll settle into his new home.
Indeed. From all of us, thank you for watching. Have a good weekend.
Bye for now.